Well, you will know Lee as being an activist and somebody who used photography in her activism. Did that have any effect on you? Because you are one of the most preeminent photography activists, or activists who use photography.
Well, you know, I would argue that Lee was an activist too.
She was, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think what we discovered was that the evidentiality of photography could be used to show people what they couldn't see.
Yeah.
And this is one of the primary kind of possibilities that photography lays in front of you. And when I think of Lee's photographs of the war, and particularly going into Dachau, which I've always been tremendously affected by, and realising what courage it took to face that, to look death in the eye, to look the greatest horror that human beings can inflict upon each other. And in a way, I was doing that too with a situation that was tremendously hurtful to a lot of people. And you can convey the truth of that through photography in a way that I think doesn't really exist in any other medium.
When did you start to become interested in photography then? Was it right at the very beginning when you were a child in Australia, or was it later?
It was later. I come from a theatre background, and I'm actually a NIDA graduate. I went through drama school. I wanted to be a director in theatre, and I did work in the theatre for about 10 years and then film. And it was actually as a researcher on a film, a really great experimental filmmaker in Australia called Mick Lachine, who was just passed in the last month. Sorry. So we were working on a film about Uluru. In 1970, to make a film about the stories in the landscape was considered very radical. And we're coming out of the Yellow House, which was a collective of artists in Sydney. And we were doing all this research, and I suddenly thought, we can't make this film without finding the people who own these stories. And so I just said, I'm going to go and find them. So I flew up to Alice Springs, and within 3 days, I landed at this place called Ebenezer Downs. It's on the way to Uluru. And I could see this Aboriginal encampment shimmering in the distance, you know, in that gorgeous light. And I just sat down because I wanted to sort of drink in the country and get to grips with where I was. And as the sun started to set, I did no more than stand up. And the kids from the camp came, and I had a box of food and I had a swag and I had a few things. I was a researcher, and I stayed with them, and I was having a cup of tea with Mary, and she leaned over to me and she said, "You arrived in Alice Springs 3 days ago. We know who you're looking for." And the elder who I was looking for, who actually, talk about surrealism, appeared to me in a dream in Avesbury before I'd gone back to Australia, came walking up through the red dust. And as he'd done in the dream, he patted the ground 3 times. And I woke up in Avesbury here, and I thought, what does it mean? And then here I was, and that same gesture was repeated. And then I was taught later that this is a call. We are calling you. And then I went to stay with him in a fringe camp outside of Alice Springs. And eventually I said to him, because it was really difficult conditions, we're about a mile from drinking water. The cops were harassing the campsite all the time and the people there. These were lawmen and women and their children and their families. So I said to Captain Number 1, why are we here? Why do you choose to be here? And he said, we got nothing. We're not allowed to speak our language. We're not allowed to practice our culture. And somehow the truth of that was visceral to me. I understand it in a deeply visceral way, and it enraged me. And I thought, working on a film's fine, but who's going to see a film, you know, in an art house cinema somewhere? And suddenly I kept on asking myself the question, what can I do? And I actually started to see in terms of still images. That's how it began.